Hello and welcome to another episode of Corgi Town, USA. In my lap is Chuckles, our spokescorg. I am Candy.
I am Kat, and at my feet is Digby.
I am Kat.
I am Kat.
I am Kat.
I'm Catherine.
We also have in studio Mortimer and Tito and Booger. Well, Tito's in his crate because he and Digby like to frap and take down equipment. So we're going to try
This is true.
We get tired of rebuilding. But if you're new here, hi, welcome. We are here for you every week, all about corgi and pet parent lifestyle. We're here to support you, health of the breed, well-being of the breed, training, grooming, any kind of concerns that you might have as pet parents. We're very passionate about dogs, pets, corgis. We're here to be an information for you. We also have a creator series where we talk to different creators about pet-centric activities.
Yes.
But we're also here to educate about what makes a good breeder and where you should look when you want one. And
the questions to ask and the things to find out about.
Right. And why that's important. So there's a lot of buzz about some of the things when we consider a pet household versus a show household versus breeding stock. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But basically, most of our audience are pet parents. It's a pet household.
It's a pet household.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to us, it doesn't matter. We love the animals as animals, and most of us do, even those that are in breeding and show. But there's difference in breeding with if somebody's going to breed for dog sports and show.
Very true.
Conformation is like at the forefront of one of the most important things.
That would be for show.
Structure.
I know for with Eric,
Cat's fiance.
It as somebody who did agility, it was specifically to the breed and not always the same sort of conformity as you do for show.
And temperament. They need to have a strong work drive to do sports and agility.
Yeah.
So those are things that are important. As far as a pet household, which is our focus, these things are important because you want a nice, healthy dog who is well temperamented. The ones that we find in rescue and shelters that need to be rehomed, typically it's temperament, it's behavioral. It could be not proper training, but sometimes it's unfortunately too often if they're not bred for temperament. Sometimes they're crossbred, which is why I think AKC lineage is important, because you can trace back to make sure they're not crossbred.
Right.
That winds up in both health problems and temperament problems. So that's why we address this. We're certainly not judging anybody's corgis.
Nope.
I've had a lot of rescues that came from backyard situations
and rescues who are wonderful and have a wonderful temperament, and
every dog needs a good home.
Every dog needs a
but
good
we
home.
Don't want to be giving money to people who are irresponsibly breeding. And
that's right.
Again, we're not going to judge you if you didn't know and you got to. I mean, absolutely, we love all your dogs. We just want you to have the information and why we think it's important. Now that we've gone into the weeds here, we're going to bring on Esther Giuliani. I think she's ready for us. She is a breeder overseas in Europe.
Yes.
And she's been doing this for a while. So we thought we'd talk about the standards from a breeder that cares a lot about things like temperament and conformation, and why they think it's important.
And the standards in Europe versus the standards in the States, very different.
Yeah. So let's bring her on. Please welcome Esther Giuliani. Esther, welcome.
Hi, Esther.
Thank you. Hi, thank you. Pleased to be with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for taking the time. We wanted to start kind of talking about, first we'll have you introduce yourself and your background with breeding and kind of how you got started.
Okay. Well, it's a nice story. I'm half Dutch, and once when I was on holiday back in late 1989 with my boyfriend in Holland, my aunt had a friend who was the secretary of the Corgi Club, and she was pet sitting this Corgi, which I had no clue of as the time was. And one morning I woke up and saw this Corgi face looking at me, and I was just basically in love. And I never left them since.
That's how it happened.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all how it happened. So when I came back to Italy, I started researching Corgi clubs and bloodlines and all that stuff. And I got hooked. So when I got married in 1993, I got my first Corgi. And from there, which was a fluff, by the way. And then from there on, I started looking at, well, at the time she was a puppy, so she had a heavy coat. And my first show, the judge was English. And she said, what a wonderful corgi, but the coat was quite heavy. So he supposed it was going to turn out as a fluffy. And indeed it did. But that corgi stayed with me for 15 years because obviously she was my corgi.
Yeah.
And then on, I researched. I went back to UK and researched proper breeders. Let's put it this way, and I found my first, let's say, standard corgi, and from there I started breeding, and there now in 2024 I've got 14 corgis.
Wow.
Yeah.
She vacuums more than I do.
Yeah, she actually, there's somebody in the world who has more corgis than you.
Me. I have 4. I've had 9 over 20 years.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, not all at once. Well, let's talk about the differences. Sort of we're going to talk about breed standard, and there's a little bit of a stigma attached to saying breed standard because, again, when it's a pet household, it's different than a show or agility household. But for all intents and purposes, focusing on the pet household. The reason why we think breed standards are important is because the breeders like yourself that have been doing this for many years know what they're doing if they're breeding for preservation.
That's right.
You care about conformation because that's important for the health of the dog, the arthritis risk, intervertebral disc disease risk. These are things that come from poor conformation. Arthritis can happen with age, but the better conformed they are, the less of a risk. And then also temperament is so important because a relaxed dog that's confident is a healthy dog. A dog that's stressed out and is hard to manage is not as healthy and drives itself crazy and the parent crazy. So this is why we think these are important and why we talk about breed standard. And here we have the AKC, American Kennel Club, where we can trace lineage. So it's good to know to have that background on genetics and know, risk assessment for genetic factors that are common in corgis, because obviously that's very, very important. Degenerative myelopathy being one of the more important ones.
Right.
And so that's why we talk about this. It's not because we're elitist or we're pretentious. We believe in preservation breeding for the health of the breed and longevity of having this wonderful breed. So we'd love to talk about kind of, in your estimation, what you think is important when you go to breed your dogs, like what you look for.
Well, as you said, I am a preservative breeder, so I love preserving the standard. Now, the standard shows basically the corgi is a working dog. We must start from there.
Yes.
And as a working dog, it should be fit for the function. That's why I look at conformation. That's why I look at health tests. And that is why I keep the standard, let's put it, the working standard in mind. When I see a corgi that is too fat or badly conformed, I always think that this dog can't work. And these are working dogs. So even if they're your pets on the couch, it is for their health important to be fit for what they should be doing, because nobody wants a dog that has to basically roll around, because that means he would have problems with his back, with his legs, with his everything, because he's not healthy. So my aim is to breed fit, let's say working type, let's put it this way, standard corgis. Now, I live on a farm and I live with horses. My official job is a livery for horses. I have 26.
Wow.
And my corgis live with me and work with me in a way that they are following me everywhere the whole time. So following me everywhere, they need to be fit. They can't actually do 2 strides and then plot on the ground because they don't have, breath, or their their legs are hurt, or their back is too weak and everything. So for me, conformation on a dog, is it a pet or a show dog, is very important, because it's for the health of the dog. You need to have a well-conformed dog. That
And
for me is basic.
and as you said that, that made so much sense to me, because it's a pet. Okay, we're not doing agility with a dog. We're not.
No,
They're not hurting cattle.
We're not
at
hurting
home.
cattle.
No.
And even if it's a pet, its heritage is that of a working dog.
of course.
And so you're gonna and so if it was bred improperly, this suddenly makes sense to me. If it's bred improperly, in its little mind, it's saying, I'm a working dog. I need to do these things. I need to do these
Work
things.
drive, yeah.
Work drive,
Exactly.
work drive. And in its body,
Can't.
it can't. And now that's where I can see a dog getting so frustrated and so upset,
Not fulfilled.
not fulfilled.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly. That's the
Wow.
point. So
That-
that is my point. What, even
Yeah.
when they say, oh, I have a lot of people who say, but I'm not interested in shows. I want, a pet. Yeah, but you want a pet for your family, maybe with kids. And how frustrated is a dog that cannot run with kids after a ball, or with them, or everything, because he's all crooked. Now think of that. Basically,
Yeah.
a couple of kids is like a couple of of cattle. So if you can't herd cattle, let alone 2 kids. So for me, conformation is the basics of breeding.
That's a
You
great
know.
perspective.
And it just
Yeah.
it makes it so clear. It doesn't, it pulls it right out of, oh well, you're being snotty, or oh, you're being this,
Yeah.
to a real logical explanation. I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great perspective. Thank you for sharing that with us.
It's okay.
Yeah. And
It's fine,
so
like-
genetic tests, we talk about being well conformed, having kennel registry for having genetic lineage. We always recommend, at the bare minimum, that the breeder should be testing for exercise-induced collapse, because there's a high presentation of that in corgis, as well as degenerative myelopathy, which I have a personal journey with, and I don't want anybody to have to go through that anymore, as much as we can help it. And then also VWD, von Willebrand disease, which is a
Yeah.
bleeding disorder. Are those steadfast where you're breeding? Or are there more that you think should be looked for? Can you educate us a little bit on what you think is important genetic testing?
Well, all my dogs are tested for the main von Willebrand, that is, the VWD. For heart, there is an increasing number of corgis who have heart failure.
Oh,
That is a big problem in a working breed.
New fear
In Europe,
unlocked.
I'm saying in Europe, and unfortunately, there is a kidney disease that was imported in some of the bloodlines from Australia, who is also kicking in if you're not careful on how you breed. Unfortunately, there's no genetic test for the kidney thing, but I always test my dogs for the main issues. Now, the DM is quite a controversy as far as the test is concerned, because it the every well the DM has been proven to be a test which is in a certain way unreliable, because the only way you can actually confirm DM is a post-mortem.
Right. Which is
And
hard to do. At
yeah,
least in the States, we only have a handful of vets that can actually do a necropsy
right,
after the fact. There are a lot of layers of problems with that. It's
exactly.
finding availability, expense, and then also after because I've done it personally, after going through a DM process with a dog,
the journey.
Yeah.
you are emotionally, physically, mentally depleted.
Yeah,
You've
And
been trying to,
financially.
and financially, you're like, I I'm pretty sure my dog had it because I watched him deteriorate in front of my eyes, right? He hits all those markers. So yes, you are correct. And we always say that. I'm always open to breeders. I understand you have to reduce your breeding stock because it's such a high prevalence in corgis. I think 63% carriers was the last documented. And you're correct. Just because they are at risk, which is what the test tells you, does not mean 100% they're going to develop. So yes, we are aware of that, and that's why it's
Yeah.
unreliable.
That
I
that
just haven't been convinced it's okay, right?
yeah.
Because of the risk,
Well, there's also carriers,
right?
and there's a test, I think, with paw prints. It's an American laboratory who actually tests if a carrier is going to actually develop the disease.
Oh, that's
because
So,
I've been educated because before we've had A, B, and C, right?
yeah,
You're either at risk, carrier, not at risk.
exactly.
Yeah. So we've had three different.
Well, I know this because I have a dog, a male, who was a carrier, and I sold it to France, and the owner did this test. So the test came back saying the dog would never develop the problem.
Hmm.
wow.
So that was interesting for me because it's called the P110. I could, I'll try to find it out and then post it on. But that is interesting. Unfortunately, in Italy, we're quite, being it is now a fashion dog. Everybody is breeding, but nobody knows the standard and the bloodlines. They are doing a lot of mess.
Yeah.
When you say fashion, do you mean popular?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
popular because no, really a fashion, unfortunately here in Italy, let's say we had the fashion of when the film came out of the 101 Dalmatians,
Yeah.
everybody wanted a Dalmatian. And
Right.
after a year, the dog pounds were full of Dalmatians.
Mm-hmm.
We get
Yeah.
the same thing here. And
Right.
yes, I will say that yes, popular would be the translated word, but
Yeah.
also
Status.
status, it is a fashion thing. So everything about an Italian, and I can say this because I'm Italian, audience, it is how we present ourselves. I
Yeah.
am not the standard, please, because I'm American, but it is all about the presentation. Every ounce of you is about the presentation, including the dog that's on the end of the leash.
So it's status. Yeah. We don't
It's
have as
status.
much of that in America.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
Unfortunately, in Italy, yes. So, and another thing that disgusts me is money. I mean, I don't say I'm rich because I'm not, but I breed for a passion. When I hear breeders that were breeding like Newfoundlanders or Golden Retrievers and buy a couple of corgi bitches saying, that isn't fashion anymore, so I can't sell them, I will sell corgis. That means you're breeding with the wrong ethics. That
Yeah.
means you're breeding with no knowledge, and that's where the problems arise.
Absolutely.
But
That's why we
unfortunately,
have this show. Yeah, that's why we have
uh,
this show. It's when I had my first corgi in the States, people didn't know what he was. They didn't, what am I looking at here? What an interesting looking dog.
Right.
And then with social media and everything, they got really popular. So we're trying to let people know it's so important where your dogs come from.
That's right.
This is
yeah, exactly. I'm always open to people who send me emails saying I would like to come and visit your kennels, and which I always laugh on because I don't have kennels because my dogs are all in the house. But anyway,
Wow.
I'd say
free
come.
range.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always say come and meet them, come and see what a real corgi is, because a lot of people think they're lap dogs, and they're not lap
No.
dogs. They're
No.
active working dogs.
Yes.
So, a lot of people get withdrawn when they say, "Oh, but it's not small." I said it shouldn't be small because it's a working dog. It has to herd cattle. It can't be 3 kilos,
Right.
And, it's quite frustrating for me because I've been brought up corgi wise by a huge mentor that was a breeder in England. That's the Belroyd Kennels, which is one of the foundation kennels. And when I would talk to him, I mean, unfortunately, he's not here anymore, but when I talked to him, we were really disgusted by what we saw, because, people just breed. Oh, well, it's fashion. I find, Ruby at the park, let's do a litter.
Oh,
That's
no.
not
Yeah.
how it works. That's
No.
not how it works health-wise. It's not how it works standard-wise. There's a lot of problems here in Europe um, regarding this, because there's more and more breeders who have absolutely no knowledge on what they are doing.
Mm.
So what they're doing is, as I call, test breeding. They take everything clear test, dog, and they put it on an everything clear bitch. And sometimes I look at these puppies and say, yeah, they're standard clear as well, because they have nothing to do with a corgi puppy. They look like chihuahuas, pinchers. They have nothing to do with these. But
Mm.
these people have no clue. They only want to cash. So, as a dedicated breeder and a preservative breeder, I see these things, and it really, really messes me up, because I've worked 24 years to keep the breed as it is. And then here comes this chap and breeds, dog one to do a dog two, and it has corgis. And unfortunately, there's a lot of market. So they manage to sell these dogs as corgis, but they have nothing corgi wise,
Mm.
And
Gosh.
another big issue is the kennel club, because in Italy, you just register them. They don't have any sort of control over what you register.
Oh, so
So,
it can be a registration, but you're not actually getting. Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, like Mr. Finn can go register a litter of corgis, done obviously between two corgis, with absolutely no health check, no standard check, nothing, and he gets the papers.
Ooh.
So they sell these corgis as corgis, but you look at them and you say, yeah, at the end of the tail, if there is one, sort of things.
That makes my heart sad.
It
Yeah.
does. And
So tell me.
yeah,
Yeah.
and as a foster mama and working with the shelters here in Phoenix, we're too full. We're too full because these
Off
dogs
the rails breeding.
off the rails breeding, no breed standard, not just with corgis, but with any
With everything.
breed.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And here these, and I, I'm at the shelters to pick up the dogs and to, to bring them for their health check, and it's just so full, and that they can't hold all the dogs. They can't.
I know.
It's physically impossible. So
This is why we think it's so, so important where your dog comes from.
Yeah.
That's right.
We're all advocating on the side of the pets, on the side of the dogs. We
Yeah,
don't
of course.
we don't want this anymore, and that's why it's so important where they come from. Someone like Esther here, who does genetic testing, is mindful about the health, how they present, their proclivities, all these things that are important. I mean, there's a big adopt don't shop movement here in the States.
Yeah.
And I don't argue with that. I've had adoptions. I've adopted
Yes.
over and over again. 100%. It's a fulfilling process, and we are going to encourage you to do it. Absolutely. We need fosters. We need you to adopt. However,
of
we are
course.
not going to shame anyone. If you
No.
want a dog from a breeder, just please go to the right one.
Go to the right breeder.
Because of this.
Go to the right breeder.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the issue. When people, another problem we have here, I don't know if it's in the States, we have the price problem. So you breed, you test, you do everything proper, you grow the puppies, socialize the puppies, and then you ask a price, and there comes the person who phones you up and you says, how much is a puppy? And you say the price, and then they say, oh, but I found one cheaper.
Yep.
So, what can you say with that? You can say, yeah, go to the cheap one, but then don't come back to me when the cheap one gets sick, but it's a very sticky thing. in Europe. It's I
And
think in
But this is your
America.
companion. This is your companion.
Companion.
Please don't bargain basement.
right.
Oh,
It's so
bargain
much.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they bargain on everything, let alone dogs,
Yeah. Well,
but that's a big issue. And I'm not nudging, when they say, oh, but I found it cheaper, go
go.
buy it cheaper. And then tell me, I had, in these years, I had more than one experience of people calling me after they took the cheaper one saying, but I said, well, it's your fault. You know, if
Yeah.
you have a cheap puppy, it's not against the puppies. I mean, I grew up with foster dogs and I love foster dogs. If it wouldn't be for my husband who's blocking me, I would have 25 dogs, not 14. But the problem is that I want to give a suitable puppy to a family, especially when they have kids. There
Yes.
is a lot of breeders who breed just for money, who give these puppies to families with kids, which get bitten, which get, molded, because these dogs are absolutely no corgis. They are bred, just for the money, and they don't have the character. They're maybe skittish, maybe aggressive. I mean, for me, character is important in my, in my breeding program. The character standard. I mean, the character is part of the standard. In the standard
Right.
of the corgi, it always states bold but never aggressive. I had a family who had to give away their corgi because it had sent the father-in-law and the husband to the hospital for stitching.
Oh my goodness.
Now,
Yeah.
how bad
Yikes.
can that be? And that comes from backyard breeders.
Yeah.
And I'm not against. I mean, I'm one of a big dog lover. First of all, corgi or whatever breed, but you have to be responsible when you breed, because
Absolutely.
these puppies are going in their new homes, and it's up to their temperament and their personality if they can stay there or not. And giving aggressive puppies to people with families with kids is something that is a no-go for me.
It is an increasing problem here. And I know
Exactly.
it's increasing. I'm a trainer and I get called on these cases. They
Yeah.
say, "Oh, you have corgi experience. They're so spicy." And I'm like, you are correct. That's a good way to explain that. They're
Yeah.
bold. They are
Yeah.
not spicy. If they don't have bite inhibition, something went wrong somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
a
glad
big
that you brought that
problem.
up. So
Yeah.
let's talk about so we talk about breed standard. Thank you for educating us.
I want to talk about the tail.
That's what I was getting at.
Okay, cool.
So we talk about
I love the tails.
docking. So there is genetic mapping, right? So there is natural bobtail in Pembrokes.
Yep.
I was taught that early on. Pembroke. You remember Pembroke versus Cardi, and Pembroke, the tail was broken off. I've had my rescue hammer was a natural bobtail.
Aw, but his tail was a little longer.
It was a little longer, but it was
Right.
short. And in the States, you can dock, and a lot of the breeders do, but it's illegal where you live, Esther.
Yeah. All Europe now is most of Europe is illegal to dock.
And
It's absolutely.
how do you feel about that? Is it that the Pembroke should be natural bobtail, or is it a genetic anomaly? Give us your take on that.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people think that natural bobtails have a lot of problems.
Okay.
That's not true.
Okay.
Natural bobtails are natural bobtails. I mean, they're born with this trait. And the natural bob can be short, long, halfway, you name it. It's not actually a specific length,
Oh,
but
okay.
it doesn't give any sort of problems to the puppy. In my house, I have tails and natural bobtails. They move evenly. They have absolutely no problem at all in no ways. So it is nothing, because a lot of people think that natural bobtails have, problems because it's not natural. But as it says, it's a natural bobtail. It's born like that. In Italy, well, in Europe now, they're breeding with natural bobtails. It's dominant gene. So it's always preferable to mate a natural with a tail, because it has been proven that natural bobtail by natural bobtail breeding gives a lot of problems to the puppies. They're they're low number of puppies. They can, they can be whelped with a lot of abnormalities or reabsorbed in the womb. So a lot, we tend to do natural bobtail by tail. But when they're born with a natural bobtail, they're perfectly okay. We have gone down the lane of the natural bobtail because in Europe we're not allowed to dock anymore. And a corgi without a tail is the, let's say, original corgi. So we're used to seeing corgis without a tail. And when people see corgis with a tail, they're like set off, sort of. Is it in standard? Is it okay? Now we are having the docking ban for quite a number of years, so people are actually used to having tails.
Okay.
The tails carriage is being they have reorganized the tail carriage standard in the UK because of the fact that first there was no tail. Then what do we do with the tail? If you have a corgi with a tail, how has it, how do you have to keep it? How does the dog have to carry the tail? So that's also a big argument here in Italy or in Europe, because some corgis are born with a curly tail, some born are with a foxy tail. They're all in the standard. But personally, I don't like curly tails. Frankly, I have two puppies now, which are 6 months, who have beautiful foxy tails. I like the tails. We can't do anything about it. If you have a tail, you have a tail, and you can't dock, so you have to keep it. It's not against nature, as they say. I mean, the natural bobtail gene was researched way back in the years by one of the first corgi breeders. She was Peggy Gamble, and I like them better without, to be very, very honest. But
and doesn't that present a problem for the working breeds? Because I was always educated that you don't want them to have a tail because they could get stepped on if they're hurting.
True. But you also teach me that there's a very few, in Europe, there's a very few, a very low number of corgis that actually work.
Yeah.
They're mostly pets.
Yes.
Mine certainly don't work.
So
I'm looking down at mine, and he is not even
Couch
vaguely working. He is just a giant potato.
but I can tell you this, I have corgis with the tails,
Mm-hmm.
and they had never have any problems with their tails. I mean,
Yeah.
stepping on or everything. They're very quick. I have horses. You should see how they work with the horses. They have absolutely no problem. Obviously, we're talking about hobby. I'm not working with the cattle. I'm not working with the sheep. My horses are all a livery of riding horses. But tails could have been a problem once when they were actively working. Right now, I say there's no problem with the tails.
Okay.
90% of the corgis are pets or show dogs. And you'd certainly have no problems with show dogs. They don't get treading on or anything.
No.
Well, so let's talk about the fluff coats.
The fluff coats, right.
So I want to talk about fluffies. That, again, it's another issue with fluffies not being breed standard. Now, again, as pets, we don't care, right? But if
Right.
you're breeding for preservation, I'm understanding that there's a concern with fluff coat because somewhere in there, there's not corgi. That's what has been told to me. I don't know if that's...
No, actually, the fluffies are the one that with the best conformation. That is what makes breeders very mad, because you have a beautiful conformed corgi and he's got a nice fluffy coat. So
Okay,
what to
interesting.
do with that? What to do with that? I'm not against fluffies. As I said, my first puppy was a fluffy.
Yeah.
The problem here is in Italy is that some breeders, let's call them so, I wouldn't call them, define them as breeders, but puppy farmers, sell these fluffies as rarity. Now,
Mm,
if you're a good breeder, you test, because there's a very simple test to cut out the fluffies from your lines. If you have
Okay.
a fluffy carrier, you just mate it to a fluff-free dog. And mind you, fluffy carriers are very important for breeding, because if you keep on breeding fluff-free with fluff-free, you get bold corgis.
Oh,
Undercoat goes.
wow.
So, yeah.
interesting.
So we need the fluffy carriers to keep these nice coats, the famous coats we know of the corgis, the undercoat, the working breed, and the working coat, and everything. The fact that fluffies have been sold as rarity, that is what makes me mad, because it's not a it's not a problem for the dog in a way, but it could become, because a fluffy coat, especially in winter or when it's raining, is not the same consistency of a normal coat of a corgi.
Hmm.
The coat of a corgi is weatherproof. The fluffy isn't weatherproof.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
no, I've noticed that. We have friends with fluffies, and I've noticed that there is a discernible difference.
Yeah, but
in-
we don't have that much rain. So
We don't have those trained, but I have noticed.
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
okay, that's interesting to know. I mean, I love the fluffies too,
Oh,
but
I
I've
love
been
that.
A lot of American breeders have told me that fluff coat is not it's not breed standard, and so it's been
It
sort of a
isn't.
negative mark that they shouldn't be willfully breeding fluffies is what has been told to me. I don't know.
No, absolutely. And that is correct. But
Okay.
what happens is that fluffies get bred by breeders, put it between brackets, the breeders,
Right.
that don't test. I've been breeding 24 years and I've never had a fluffy born in my house because I test. So if you have a fluffy carrier and you breed it to a fluff-free dog, that is no issue. You have all regular corgis. But if you don't test and you put two carriers, because obviously you do not know because you didn't test, and you get fluffies, it's no problem. I mean, fluffies, I've lived with a fluffy for 15 years. The
Right.
issue is the grooming and the daily care of a fluffy. Because if you live in the city and it's raining, it gets drenched. So you have to bring it up, dry it out, and everything. If you live in the country, when you come home from a nice walk in the woods, you'll find half of the woods attached to your corgi coat.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
They pick up everything.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm not against them. They're wonderful. I mean, they're the same. They're basically corgis. They have nothing different except the coat. But that coat isn't in the standard of a working corgi. My fluffy was so fluffy, I had to clip her every April because she couldn't even walk because she would step on our coat.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
you
So
need the gene. You need the gene. You just don't need the coat.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And when you are a preservative breeder, you need the gene because it helps you keep a nice working coat, but you need to work it out because um, you don't want fluffies in your breeding. You want fluffy carriers who you can mate to fluffy freeze.
Mm.
That is
So
You've
the
educated
issue,
us a lot today. Yeah.
that
yeah,
is so it's crazy. It's crazy how much you know, and we've spoken to other breeders and everything. It's how much you know, how much you've researched. 24 years, the genetic testing, the genetic matching to not only get conformity and the health, but every aspect to as you said, to preserve
yeah.
this coat and this breed and everything that it has become over the years, because it developed in the wild. Everything developed in the wild, if you will, for
Yeah,
a reason. And these guys
exactly.
developed for a reason. And you don't want to lose that,
That reason.
that reason. And
Exactly.
they
So
don't do what they did, but you want them to have those developmental wonderfulnesses.
Yeah,
yeah,
wonderfulness.
That's my word. I'm sticking to it. Wonderfulnesses.
yeah. I mean, fluffies are fantastic. I mean, I told you, I lived with a fluffy. I had to clip because she was too fluffy, but they have nothing wrong with them except the coat. But
Right.
the problem is that my issue is that when I see people buy a fluffy and you talk to them and they say, the breeder said it was a rare trait, so I had to pay for double. Excuse me, I said, that is what makes me mad, because corgis
Right.
are working breed. How can you see a fluffy working the cattle? I mean,
That's exploitation.
Yes.
Yeah, exploitation.
you're concerned about a tail. Look at a fluffy working the cattle. He'll never, ever manage to do that in his health. I mean, he would die after 5 seconds working with that coat
Right.
in the rain, in the Welsh moors. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
You know.
Wow. Well,
So
thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds, because
Right.
I want to talk a lot about this, and we may have to have you back on in the future
Absolutely.
to talk more about.
Absolutely.
wonderful.
Uh,
Yeah, no problem.
But very quickly, I want to talk about because we're talking about the genetic mapping. So in the States, we have, and we did this on our season closer last season, talking about what makes a good breeder. And we talked about, quote unquote, what they're calling the American Corgi. And that's not actually a breed. And it's not registered in our registries. It's not a real breed. It's mixing Pembrokes with cardigans. Now,
Okay.
as far as a pet consider, I can see why people say, "Oh, I don't care." For starters, we love your Americans, okay? We love all of them. We're not demonizing it. It's that if you went to a breeder that's breeding them on purpose, that is not a preservation breeder, because that's not breed standard.
Right.
And that's why that's important. And the other thing is that I don't think we quite understand the genetic implications yet, because it's sort of a new thing.
Right.
We don't know what we're up against
And
yet.
let's talk about like what I know. So my son Digby is a Merrill, and that means that he has one brown eye and one blue eye. And as an aside, my fiance has one blue eye and one green eye. And when people see us, I tell them that, oh yes, this is his son, because you can see that they both have, one blue eye and one other color eye.
Digby didn't come from the mailman.
And people stop and go, oh yeah, which makes me lose faith in humanity. That's beside the point. I know that if he were able to breed, we cut him. And if he found a female that had one blue eye and one brown eye, we would end up with a blind dog. And
But Merle genes are also not always obvious. They
Right.
could be carrying and not presenting.
They could be carrying and not presenting. So
that's why that's
and
problematic.
before we started recording the podcast, you were talking about backyard breeders that are
in Europe, we're breeding the wrong color cardigans.
Right, the wrong color cardigans. So can we kind of touch on all of that and the problems that arise when you don't know and you don't test?
Well, yeah. Well, PEMs in a way are quite easy. Let's give it to me, color wise. Cardigans are very complicated to breed because of the Merle gene, because of a lot of traits. Cardigans are quite difficult to breed, and that's why I didn't want to go down that way when I started breeding. I love the PEMs and I stuck with them. But they have color issues. You're not allowed to breed two Merles together. If you have a brindle point, which is, those black and brown dogs, with the stripes, you're not allowed to breed those with other colors. I mean, they have strictly color breeding. If you don't follow that, you will have mismarks on the coats, which lead to genetical traits, which can be brought on by breeding these, let's say, wrong puppies on to other dogs. So, as you said, with the Merles, you can have blind dogs.
Yeah.
We have a similar thing in PEMS where there are people who breed dogs who bring too much white, and the too much white brings deaf dogs. So when you breed certain breeds like the cardigans, you have to be very, very careful on your knowledge of color breeding, because the colors bring genetics which have to be very strictly followed. Otherwise, you get huge problems, not only blindness, but deafness, mismarks that could bring to other big issues. Now, I'm not very much an expert on cardigan breeding because I've never done it, but I did see this breeder here in Italy who bred two wrong colors, and all these puppies came out with the wrong colors. Now, as I said, unfortunately in Italy, nobody checked them, so he just registered them. And these dogs actually have pedigrees.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, the colors are not only colors, are genetic traits, which bring along a lot of problems if not bred properly. So I'm very strict on colors alone. Now in PEMS, it's easier. They only have, red, black and white, like the black-headed tries, the tricolors, or the blonde ones, which we know. The cardigans have a lot of other colors. They have blue merles, black and tan, they have brindles. So we have to be careful when breeding. You have to put knowledge above everything. And if you don't have knowledge, don't breed it. That's my point of view, actually.
It makes a ton of sense. We just think of, so for those who are just listening to the podcast and not seeing it, as those who watch, I do have blue hair. I was not born with the blue hair. We have the ability to change our hair color, and and hair color, may or may not mean anything in that sense. But
Like the old adage that redheads are crazy. That was like a thing
Yeah.
for a while.
well,
Yeah.
they are. Anyway, but you make the point of it. It's not just that, oh, it's a
No.
brown dog or it's a this dog. That coloring means that they have a genetic
Predisposition.
a genetic something that, when mixed improperly, will cause problems.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's so sad for these poor little babies that we as humans are responsible for.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. The huge problem is that these breeders are not responsible. That is the word. They just do it for money. And
Right.
that is the problem with the wrong colors. That is the problem with the fluffies. I mean, you find yourself with a fluffy Pem in your house. He's the most wonderful pet in the world. But then you go and have a walk and you have to come back, and this dog, after 10 minutes outside in the pouring rain, can't walk anymore because he's drenched. It's not fair on him. Absolutely not fair. And that is what my issue is with the fluffies, or with the wrong colors in the cardigans. It's just not ethical to breed a dog which is meant for a purpose, and you just change its genetics.
Yeah.
That's the it.
Well, and it's all for the love and well-being of them, and that's
Of
why.
course.
So it's good to be educated on why colors and mindful breeding of colors is important.
I think
we're seeking novelty at the potential expense of a being.
Yes,
Yeah.
at the expense of the well-being of the dog, and at the expense, as you said, Esther, of the well-being of your family. because
Of course. Of course.
now you've got a dog that's going to bite where these dogs don't bite. You've got a dog that's
Exactly.
going to fight where these dogs don't fight. And so yeah, you're hurting not just the dog, you're hurting a lot of you're hurting your children. You are hurting your children potentially when you're not paying
Of course.
attention
To where your dog comes from.
to where your dog comes from. So this has
Yeah.
been quite the education.
Yeah.
It's-
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This helps us kind of bring forward our point. I'm always very careful because, again, we love all the corgis. Like, we love you, audience, dear listener, dear viewer. We love you. We love your pets so much.
Yeah.
We would never judge or be pretentious against any kind of, breed, unstandard, whatever. It's that we want you to get them from the right places because it's important for their health and well-being. And Esther, you drove that home for us today.
So
Yeah.
much so.
Why that
You
is
are
on the why.
You are such a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to have you on again.
We
But
will.
I do want to wrap the episode. We went long, so we don't want to lose anybody. So I do want to wrap it up. But we want to thank you so much for your time and education today. We really
Yes.
Oh, it's a
appreciate it.
pleasure. It's always pleasure talking dogs.
That's right.
So-
Mille grazie, mille grazie.
It's okay. Okay, prego.
Well, I don't speak Italian, so anyway, thank you.
That's what I said.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
I know prego. I know prego.
Prego,
Yes,
you're welcome.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you have a wonderful rest of your night, Esther. Thank you so much.
Thank you to you
Bye.
for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We came out of this much smarter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always um uh, uh, interested, I guess, when you learn something new. It's like, oh wow.
Yeah,
You know?
definitely.
Yeah.
But I think this also helps us communicate the why, because I'm always afraid that's going to get lost on why we talk to you, dear listener, dear viewer, on why we feel certain ways about certain things. It's not because we're elitist.
No.
It's not because we're pretentious. It's not because, it should be this way because it should be this way. It's because we want healthy, well-bred dogs and companions for you.
That's right.
And we are all about the animals first. And this just helps. She helped us so much explain on the
She did.
why of what that is.
Absolutely.
So, but we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please like and subscribe. There's
tell
more where
your
that came from.
friends.
Tell your friends. Please share. The more you can help us, the more we can keep going.
That's right.
We will see you next week.
We'll see you next
Candy,
week.
Cat, Chuckles,
Digby.
Booger, Mortimer, and Tito.
Yep. All of them.
Bye.
Bye.